Just Like Us for LGBT young people.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Just Like Us monthly podcast. You're joined with me, Arbër. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm here today with...
Hi, I'm Elly. My pronouns are they and them. It's good to be here. We've got a guest on today. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Blythe. My pronouns are he, they, she, whatever you want, really. It's great to be here today.
Amazing. We're so happy to have you here with us today. So today we're going to speak about asexuality. Within the LGBT plus community, it sometimes doesn't get the representation it deserves. And considering October 25th to the 31st is Asexuality Awareness Week, we really wanted to provide a space that actually looks at the experience of being an asexual person and the kind of ins and outs of it. So we have Blythe with us here today. And the first initial question is, what does being asexual mean to you?
For me, being asexual means that I have no real desire to do anything sexual with anyone. I don't have any sexual attraction. It doesn't mean that that emotional component isn't still there. And it doesn't mean that I don't want a relationship. It just means that I don't want the sexual side of things.
That's really interesting, yeah. I feel like it's something that we don't talk about a lot in the LGBT plus community, and it's something that I haven't really had the opportunity to speak to someone about, so we're really interested to chat with you about that today. Would you be able to tell us when you first realised that you were asexual, how you came to that realisation and what that felt like?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fairly recent discovery, to be honest. I was talking to my flatmate, and before that I thought I was bisexual. And I was talking to my flatmate and I was like, but I just don't want to do anything sexual with anyone. I don't have that desire, you know? And I was like, but I still think people are sexy. Mm-hmm. And she was like, that's just called having eyes. Like, that like, I thought that was what sexual attraction is. Apparently not. So yeah, it went from basically one far end of the spectrum to the other far end. But this label makes a lot more sense. And looking back, it definitely makes a lot more sense because I've just never had that strong desire to do anything sexual.
Yeah, that really does make sense. Do you feel as though like asexual people don't get, obviously the LGBT plus community is like a minority itself, and it's almost like you're a minority within a minority. So it kind of feels like you don't have almost like any representation. I know for myself, growing up, there was almost like no kind of representation for asexual people. So it's kind of like, and it was almost like it was something that was almost polarized in a way as well. Like it was seen as something quite separate and, you know, different. So for you, did you ever have like, you know, any form of representation growing up as a child or going through school or whatever it may be?
Yeah, I mean, I was never taught in a school setting or anywhere really about like asexuality and what that is. Like I had to learn for myself, you know, as I think pretty much all asexual people do. I don't know if the school system has changed in the couple of years I've been out of it, but yeah, I haven't seen any of that representation. And I think the people that harms the most is asexual people because they just might not know what it is. And like labels can be a real comfort. And I know for some people they don't like them, but for me, I find them a comfort. And so like, I can't imagine if you don't know that label exists, it makes it even harder to like come to terms with who you are, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I agree. And I think also the fact that there isn't much representation and it's not much talked about leads to like many other people in the LGBT plus community not really understanding what it is either. I mean, for me, I've kind of researched it a bit myself. I don't know a huge lot about it, which probably means that, you know, I don't always get things right in terms of the language that I use around it, or just, you know, something that I forget to think about when I'm thinking about LGBT issues and things we need to discuss around the community. So that representation definitely also helps to educate people that, you know, asexuality is a thing, what it is, and that, you know, it's okay and it's a part of our community. Yeah.
And just touching on like representation, what do you think if you did have that sense of representation, what do you think that would have done for you going through like the educational system? Because obviously, just like us, we're actively trying to diversify schools and, you know, bring our talks to schools and really give them that sense of representation. So for you, what do you think having that representation, what do you think it would have done for you as a young teen?
I think obviously number one is it would have made me realize like who I am and my sexuality, my identity much sooner. Because I feel like schools and society in general, I mean, I'm not sure if JLU can reconstruct society, but...
we can try.
Yeah, we'll try our best. But I feel like it pigeonholes you a lot into the idea that everyone has that sexual attraction. Like, being taught that from a young age, I mean, it is still fairly young. Obviously, we're developing, we're working out who we are, and being pigeonholed into that view that everyone has the sexual attraction, it can almost make you in denial and not even consider the option of being asexual, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of the time, potentially the kind of ideas around asexuality were quite negative in society. And the way that you're approaching it is, I may not have sexual attraction to people, but I'm very much open to being in a romantic relationship with someone. And that's something that you like generally want in your life, like you said in the beginning. So it kind of shows like a different perspective and a more nuanced perspective that lacks a lot in society and pertaining to this community. So yeah, just going off that, how do you find dating and how do you approach that like dating world, especially in the community we have now? It can be quite sex orientated.
Yeah, and I still identify as gay. And that's in terms of the romantic side of things. So that's the emotional component of relationships rather than the physical sexual component. And so with gay people, especially, I feel like it's particularly sex focused. Society has particularly forced that upon the gay community, I feel. That's especially prevalent, I find. And so, yeah, it's hard. And I have found myself in situations where I've tried doing sexual stuff because that's the only way I can see to get in. But obviously, I haven't gotten anything from it, you know?
Yeah.
It's a real shame that it's like that. And I think it's kind of the double-edged sword of the LGBT plus community is in general quite a sex positive place, which can be a great thing. But it's, you know, it can also be then to the detriment of people who don't want to be doing those things. You can feel a bit on the edge of the community if that becomes the sole focus. So I think that's why it's really important that you're here and explaining your story, because people listening will have more understanding of the different people within our community, and we can sort of make sure that everyone feels more included. On that subject, do you think there's ways that other LGBT plus people, or just generally people in society, can be more inclusive, tolerant towards asexual people, and there's things they can do to make you feel welcome?
I think removing the focus on sex would obviously be a good thing, but like it's easier said than done, you know, like, because most people do have that sexual attraction. But I think creating more safe spaces where asexual people can meet is definitely a good idea, because you're usually in a sea of people who want sex, and then you've got to try and find the asexual people in that sea. But creating more safe spaces for purely asexual people would be good. I honestly believe that lots of things start with education. And I think educating people about the asexual community and asexual people early on is gonna make people more accepting in the long run.
Yeah, definitely. How do you feel then, like you were speaking about the LGBT plus community, how do you feel within that space? Do you feel like you are quite socially accepted by other members of the LGBT plus community? Or do you feel as though you may be met with some apprehension and some confusion by members of part of this community?
I mean, there are always the confusing people who like exclude different sexualities and identities from the LGBTQ plus community. And I don't understand those people. But the majority of people, I think, are accepting. But it's more like, your grand's fine with you being gay, just don't talk to her about being gay, you know?
Okay.
Like, they don't have a problem with it, but it's just not talked about. It's just a thing that's there that it's fine, but like it's not out there, you know.
Yeah, I think I see a lot of asexuality kind of in lists of things, or included in kind of a sort of an other miscellaneous section of things, you know, in kind of LGBT plus spaces. I think that's something we need to get better at as a community, is sort of taking these smaller identities, or, you know, not smaller in importance, but smaller in maybe numbers of people who have that experience, and lifting those people up. So I think that's a really, really important point. One thing I wanted to ask you is, like, how do you find the experience of coming out as asexual? Because I feel like it is different from other coming out experiences, because when it becomes something about your sexual attraction, that feels a bit more personal to yourself. So is that something that you feel like you enjoy sharing with people? Do you like to keep it more to yourself? Do you feel the need to come out to people about it? Or how does that work for you?
Yeah, so when I came out as gay, obviously that was like nerve-wracking, but like I feel like there's a reason for me telling you, because my romantic attraction will affect you. If I bring a boy home, you know, you're gonna notice that and question that. So like there's a reason for me telling you, but when it's with sexual attraction, that's like a personal, private thing, you know. So I feel like there's less of a need to come out as asexual. Yeah, I feel like it's more of a choice rather than a need. And so, like I say, my coming to terms with this is fairly recent, but the way I come out is just tell it how it is. I don't want a big hullabaloo or anything. I'll just like tell you if it comes up. But like if it doesn't come up, I'm not sure if I'd feel the need to tell people, because to be honest, it's none of their business whether I have that sexual attraction. On the other hand, coming out raises that awareness. So at the moment, the only reason I'd see for coming out to, say, my parents or my grandparents as asexual would be to educate them rather than tell them something about myself, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And I agree with you that I think it's one of those things that it feels more personal, and it is more personal. So like there's not so many people that necessarily would want to shout about it, but it's still very important to have that representation. So it's really great that you are, you know, even as you're kind of coming into an understanding of your identity, that you're here and you're sharing your story in this, you know, great setting that hopefully will educate other people. Maybe people will feel something from your story and feel like what you've told either resonates with them or has taught them something. So I feel like you are such like a positive role model for asexual people. What sort of message would you give to your younger self from your experience? What would you have liked to know at a younger age?
I think as a gay and asexual person who's not really sure about their gender at the moment, I just say, wait, you know, you'll work it out. You might not, but like, there's no rush to work it out. And sexuality and your identity is so confusing. But just live your life, you know, live your life how you want to live it. And don't try and seek out those labels prematurely, because it can lead you to coming out as the wrong sexuality or the wrong identity. And then you have to come out all over again as something different. And people are like, what? I thought you said this. So just with everything, but like, just live how you want to live and things will come to you.
And just going off that, I wanted to ask, how do you think that like you would interact with people who may not be so receptive and positive to your identity?
I mean, with lots of these people, I just think it's none of their business, you know? Like, why do you care who I love and whether I want to do sexual things with that person, you know? And if they did bring that up, I'd just say my sexual habits or lack thereof are just personal and private to me, and I don't see why you should get angry or annoyed at just the way I naturally am, you know? Because that's the thing. It's just how I naturally am. I haven't like manufactured this persona, you know? It's just happened, you know? And so being asexual, it makes no difference to how you go about your day. My sexuality is not impacting you. Your sexuality isn't impacting me. If people are angry or upset or annoyed that someone is asexual, I just say to them, how does it affect you? And it's my private and personal business, not yours. And I don't try and delve into your personal life, so don't try and attack me for mine.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. I mean, it's so true. It's so true. Yeah.
Exactly. And just maybe going off that, kind of like maybe tips and tricks on keeping quite positive, because you do seem really like positive and upbeat, and figuring your identity out is quite difficult. So what kind of things do you do to like keep yourself positive, whether it's shows or movies or whatever it may be?
I don't know, just surround myself with people who I want to be around and who want to be around me.
Yeah.
For me, I'm a big people person, and even though I don't want that sexual contact, I want intimacy, you know? And those personal relations are the things that are most important to me. And so if I'm feeling down, I'll just surround myself with people who care and who I care about. It's that mutual connection and mutual caring that I think just you can lift each other up. And I think that's, for me at least, that's the best way to cheer myself up or stay happy, because I'll just talk to them and all my stress will go away, you know? And likewise, they can offload on me. And it's just that sharing your burdens and not bottling it up. For me, that's the most calming and relaxing thing.
Amazing.
I love that.
Same.
Like, yeah, the best form of pride is just living openly as yourself and, yeah, sharing that with others. And I think you're a really great example of doing that.
Definitely.
I love it. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for chatting with us. This has been really interesting for me personally, and I'm sure for our listeners as well, have got a lot out of this conversation. You're such an interesting and positive and really engaging person. So I'm really glad that you've come on and shared with us.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. Thank you so much for coming to the show.
No, thank you for having me.
You're listening to Just Like Us, the monthly show for LGBT young people.
Okay, so now it's time for our question and answer segment. So today's question is it necessary to come out? Arbër, what do you think? Do you think it's necessary to come out?
I think it's a difficult question, kind of like when you approach this question, like what exactly does coming out look like for one person? Because I think it's a continuous process, because when you meet somebody, you're going to have to come out to them again if you want to, of course. And so I think sometimes people approach this conversation as though it's a one-time thing. Unless you're a celebrity and you do it on a massive platform, then okay. But if you're an average, regular person, coming out is a continuous, lifelong process. And so I feel like what we should do in society is not presume people's orientations or presume people's gender identity, so that the need isn't necessarily there, as in to come out. It's just a matter of fact. You know what I mean? It's just a conversation that you'll have with someone. Oh, like, this is my partner, or this is my gender identity. Like, it's not kind of like putting so much pressure on that kind of key event, because I think it can make it like a very anxious moment. I know in the past for myself, coming out was very like anxious filled, experience. And so, I think it is necessary, but I just think that we should reframe the way we approach it. The way we approach it isn't the best in society at the moment.
I agree with that. I mean, from my experience, like, coming out is super stressful. And I think that that's because there is still a lot of negative attitudes in our society, and you're never quite sure how it's going to go. Mm-hmm. I think, I can see a future where coming out is less of a thing. Because it's, at the moment, it feels like such a monumental point, because there feels like such a difference in how you might be perceived between when someone's made an assumption that you're straight and cis to when they actually see you for an LGBT plus person. Mm-hmm. People's perceptions can really shift of you. And obviously that's not how we want to live our lives. Exactly. So hopefully when we get to a point in our society, which I think we are getting closer towards as time goes on, it can feel like slow progress, but for sure we're becoming a more tolerant society, that I think it's going to be less necessary to sort of have a formal coming out. You may still feel the want and need to share with people important aspects about your identity, but I can see it being sort of, in a similar way of you saying what GCSEs you've chosen to take or something, where it's it's not something that really defines you. It's just like,
that
here's some information about me.
That kind of like normalization process. But I do think that we obviously need to give credit where credit is due. It is a very brave thing to do, especially in the societies that we live in. It is obviously, nobody's refuting that it can be a difficult thing to do. But I just feel like we need to normalize it now. It should just be a matter of fact, somebody is this or somebody is that, and we shouldn't like presume. What about you, Blythe? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think you made a really good point there about how in the society we live in today, there is that assumption that everyone is straight and everyone's either a man or a woman, and that you have the same gender as sex that you were born at birth with. And I think that assumption really makes people feel like there's that pressure to come out. And what I'd say is, do it when you want to. Don't let the pressure get to you. Just if you feel ready and you want to come out, then do it. But don't let society or other people pressure you into that.
I totally agree. And like, when discussing is it necessary, there's different ways you could take that question. And one way I would say is that no, it's not necessary to tell anyone if you're not comfortable, as you were saying, like maybe you're not ready, maybe you never want to tell anyone. As you were saying about asexuality earlier, maybe you just feel like it's none of anyone's business, like, or maybe you just, maybe it's something that you want to keep between yourself and a partner, and it's not something you want to share, or it's not something you will ever want to share. And it's like, well, that, that doesn't make you any less of a valid LGBT plus person. That's still absolutely a way that you can live. It's just important to remember that, like, not every coming out experience is the same. And the one that we quite often get portrayed, especially in the media, is coming out as a cisgender gay man. That's the one that we normally get. And there's various ways that it goes in the stories that are described to us. But there's a whole range of ways that it happens and ways that people choose to do things. And I think it's a really personal thing. And so it's kind of an interesting part of our community that, I don't know, it's like a uniting factor that, in a tolerant society, obviously, I would hope things improve, but in a way, it would also be a shame to lose this thing that kind of binds us together, that we've all had this kind of very stressful experience that we've shared. I mean, maybe for not everyone it was stressful, but, it's quite often a thing that you can ask your fellow LGBT people about, how it went to come out and what that experience was, and then it's a place where you find some community and some shared experience.
Hi everyone, it's Heather, and I am doing the JLU Choice for this month's podcast. So hello there. This month is Black History Month in the UK, and I'm super excited to share some recommendations with you. Lots of you already know, but Black History Month is a month that's been created in October in the UK to celebrate all of the brilliant contributions Black people have made to the history of the UK and often don't get recognised as much as their white counterparts, and also to draw attention to historic injustice and racism that Black people have suffered in the UK and continue to suffer discrimination today. So it's really important, but it is also really fun in terms of there's lots of opportunities to celebrate brilliant parts of Black history, brilliant figures from Black history, and also to find out loads of current Black writers, artists, models, influencers, just all sorts of amazing people who are currently doing really, really awesome things. So I think it's important to remember that Black History Month, think of it as like a jumping off point rather than an end point. So this is kind of an opportunity for you to dive in to all of this amazing culture and media that has been made by Black artists, and something to kind of move into for the whole year. So that actually is my first recommendation, which is the Black Curriculum on Instagram is really good. And they talk in UK schools about Black history and getting it into the curriculum so that it's something that we're talking about all year round and isn't kind of relegated to a single month which then suggests that all of the other 11 months are just not for Black history, which surely they should be just part of the curriculum and not need to be kind of put into this little box. I also would super recommend looking up the Black History Month website itself. There's loads of stuff on there, and also on their Instagram they've had some really interesting stories, graphics, and people speaking. They've had kind of been raising awareness of different really cool figures from history who they think should be part of the curriculum but aren't currently. So really worth having a look at that, look back through the things they've done and engage with all of their content. So I would really recommend that. I wanted to talk specifically about some books that centre Black queer people and are written by Black authors. Again, I have so many of these, I couldn't possibly choose just one, so I've chosen a few. I wanted to recommend a couple of bookstagrammers. I want to recommend somebody called Bowties and Books. They're non-binary and Black, and they recommend a wide variety of things, but quite a lot of like YA, and also often books that centre trans or non-binary people, so that's really cool. And I've got some great recommendations from them. I also recommend Tiana Vashti on Instagram. She's a Black lesbian who focuses more on like sci-fi and fantasy, which is what I'm really into, but also reads like a wide range. So I really recommend checking out both of them. Just go through their feed, you will find so many amazing books. So highly recommend them both. They're both based in America and they're both Black and they're both really cool. So I highly recommend those two.
Thank you everyone for tuning into this month's Just Like Us podcast. Thank you so much to Elly and Blythe for being here with us today. It's been a really fantastic conversation and we hope you guys tune in next month as well. Goodbye.
Yeah, thanks guys. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Just Like Us, the monthly show for LGBT young people. The music was by Twisterium. We come into schools too. Young people, teachers and parents can find us at www.justlikeus.org.